are killing us. And you have some real shocking details here, Steve. You talk about sky-high medical bills for going to the emergency room for a fall in their face, people paying $1.50 for an aspirin, $300 for an x-ray that costs Medicare $20, but that's just the beginning.
Right, and it actually bears on the conversation we're having, because a chunk of that money is paid by Medicare. Medicare, as I point out in the article, is very efficient at most things. It buys health care really efficiently, which is a great irony because it's supposed to be, you know, the big government bureaucracy. Where Medicare is not efficient is where Congress, because of lobbyists, have handcuffed Medicare. Medicare can't negotiate what it pays for any kind of drugs. It can't negotiate what it pays for wheelchairs or diabetes testing equipment. And if Congress took those handcuffs off of Medicare, you could get about half of the spending cuts that we're sitting around here talking about.
Is that true?
You could get a fair amount. And look, if Medicare were simply able to get the same prices for prescription drugs that Medicaid gets, it would save $120 billion over 10 years. So that's roughly
actually a little more.
But there's a fundamental point here, Stephen. I thought your piece was great, and I think your points are right. But I also don't want people to be confused. I don't believe that we can cut our way, change the pricing, do all the things you're talking about, and still save Medicare. The average person who is at Medicare retirement age has paid in something like $122,000 into the system. They will get back $387,000 of benefits. That's 3 times. You're not going to reduce that $387,000 by hospital cuts and this and that. We have to still have fundamental Medicare reforms to make those numbers work.
If you put Medicare in the context of the larger healthcare system, and this is something that everybody at this table is going to think that I should go to a mental hospital when I get finished saying this, the government and all of us would actually save money if you lowered, I said lowered, the age for Medicare. If the Medicare age were 60 instead of 65, the economy and the taxpayers would actually save money. And George, please don't look at me like that. I'm serious.
You're potentially right. And part of the argument about raising the Medicare age to 67 is you're taking people out of the Medicare system, which is very efficient.
And what you'd be doing is you'd be putting the most efficient player, which is Medicare. Medicare spends, 80 or 90 cents to process a claim, and the health insurance companies spend $18 or $20 or $25 to process a claim. The health insurance companies pay 2 or 3, 4 times what Medicare pays for various services. So if you lowered the age, you would put more people into the bucket of much more efficient health care. And the worst part about it is that the reforms that we have now with the president's plan are actually going to raise the cost, because all the people who are 60 or 62 or 63 who can't afford the premiums that they're going to have now are going to be subsidized by the taxpayers.
George, well, that becomes an argument for a single-payer system.
Yeah.
That's very fine.
That is one argument. Here's an argument against that for a different kind of reform. All the big numbers, billions and trillions, 12 cents is the most important number. 12 cents is the portion of every healthcare dollar paid by the person receiving the healthcare. Right. Someone else is paying the rest. It was 47 cents 50 years ago when Jack Kennedy was president. Now, let me ask the 5 of you a question. You go to the doctor and he or she says, I want to give you the following test. How many of you 5 say, how much is that going to cost?
Say, give me 2.
Yeah, the one for my kids.
Don't bother, because the doctor can't tell you either.
Right.
George, you are completely wrong. We have tried that experiment with 30 to 50 million Americans who don't have health insurance and have to pay 100% right now. And they have no choice. They are powerless consumers. If you go to an emergency room and a doctor says to you, you need a CAT scan, and the doctor may not even say it, they may just do it. You're not sitting there as a consumer saying, gee, I wonder if this is the most efficient emergency room. I wonder if I really need that CAT scan.
We have not actually tried that experiment. No, we haven't, because we only have a small group of Americans who are doing that. We have a much larger group of Americans, like George says, who are getting their health care through their companies, and it's largely paid for them, and they have no skin in the game. The important part about your piece was that you mentioned that this is a seller's market. There is no transparency in the market. There's no competition. There's no ability for consumers to look around. down. We spend hours deciding which toaster we're going to buy. We put no such thought or work into where we're going to get our health care. And you have had companies like Safeway who've worked with their employees to introduce some transparency, and you've seen a big reduction in health care costs.
There's a difference between buying a toaster and buying a CAT scan.
This is a huge moral question for the country, because I agree with George that right now most Americans do not see price in deciding whether to use health care. You see price in toasters, you see price in cars and homes, everything else. In health care, you don't see price. And therefore, I have to believe, and I think your piece alluded to this, that when people go on Medicare, they really don't see price. They tend to consume more than they otherwise would. 26% of all Medicare spending is last year of life. We don't know how much of that is really efficacious spending. These are really tough moral questions for the country, but we're going to have to deal with them if we're really going to get health care.
Well, what you're getting to, though, is the fundamental question. Are you going to let consumers make those choices about end-of-life decisions, or are you going to have Medicare make a decision about what procedures you can have and how much they'll pay, and government make those choices? That's the moral point.
If the consumers you have in mind have the money, because you're saying they're not going to have insurance, have the money to make those decisions the way my friend Mr. Ratner can. And that is not the world we live in. They're making decisions now, those consumers who don't have insurance, because they don't have the money, they can't write the checks, they're being sued for their bills. You know, this world you describe.
But once they go on Medicare, they're in a different position.
Once they're 65,
but
if they're 64.
The point all of us are trying to make is that people who have either private insurance or Medicare probably, almost certainly, consume more medical service than they need because they don't see price.
The point is, for everyone else, it's a crap shot.
The uninsured is not the germane cohort here. The germane cohort are people with high deductible insurance. That is, no one expects your automobile insurance to cover your windshield wipers or your oil changes. Insurance is for large, unpredictable events. People who buy high deductible insurance, and we now have enough of them that we have real data, two things. They use the healthcare system less, and there's no discernible health cost to it.
I want to get to one more issue before we take a break, and that is, it seems like so much of the rest of the agenda has been bogged down in the face of all these budget fights, especially this gun control, which was so much a part of the president.